on all of our different platforms. Within people can then watch the program, and a lot of people enjoy doing that, whether it be on, that's, to me, that's the name of the game, is to be on the various platforms, to try to reach out and be where the people are, so to speak. And that's one of the things that we've been able to do with some of our, the different platforms, whether it's Facebook or whether it's X, and everyone that, that to me, that's what it's about. The way you're seeing the presidential candidates speaking out and reaching out on the different platforms, or attempting to anyhow. I think that just goes to show that it's a different time, and you have to reach into where some of the different platforms are. So I think that's a big part of it. So again, just to recap, because right now we are obviously, yes, the real news. We normally are starting right at 1, but as I said, we were out at I can't really say exactly what it was, but it had to do with someone that they were looking for, and I'll talk a little bit, probably more about that a little bit later. But folks, this portion of the real news on what is just, I mean, if this is what they're talking about, if excuse me, if this is what they're talking about with climate change, if this is what they're talking about as far as the negatives of the way, then I'm in 100%. I mean, to have this type of weather in October, I'm glad for the people the kids that are still playing fall ball, or even for the World Series for that matter. I mean, just although it does cool down at night, but I mean, this type of weather, I think it's good for everybody. I know it's great for PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center, 3688 Quaker Lane in North Kingstown. Pumpkins, straw bales, corn stalks, gourds, Indian corn, homegrown mums and kale are available. This is the ideal time. I mean, this is the ideal time for planting. Granted, a little dry. It is a little dry, but beautiful sunshine. Make the most of it. PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. They're open 7 days a week. And folks, again, check out the website, thepetro.com. Brought to you by the Cohasset Inn, 226 Cohasset Avenue, West Warwick. Lunch, dinner, drinks in the lounge. They're waiting for you. As we speak, they're waiting for you at the Cohasset Inn. So as someone that's out quite a bit, and I've talked about this, that I believe the media is, I'm convinced, as a matter of fact, I am convinced that the media is not nationally now and locally, but they're not accurately reflecting and capturing what this election is about and why people are making the decisions that they're making. I don't think, I mean, right now, Attleboro Police Department, the community is reacting to a shooting outside of a hotel late Monday night. Folks, the crime and disarray, I believe this is it's a much bigger election, and it's not being captured. It's not being captured by the media. Now, I mentioned locally how Representative Patricia Morgan has the Channel 12 debate with Sheldon Whitehouse. And the third issue that was treated like every other issue was illegal immigration. And they allow him to say something. It's a broken system. Then you allow her to say something, and then they just move on. It is a dominating factor right now in the country. It's not just it's not amplified enough here in the Rhode Island, Massachusetts area, because the media, they don't want it to be an area, or they would dive more into it. Now, many times, local media, I praise them on the radio portion of the program. I played Channel 12 did a very in-depth, good piece on this suspect inmate who's a fugitive right now from the ACI, and he's out on the loose. But my point is, the local TV, they do in-depth stories on things, but nobody is doing anything on the effects of open borders in our part of the country. In other parts of the country, And what I like about the election, and what I think is so interesting about this election, especially when you see the town hall meetings, and I'm not talking about the Kamala Harris fake town hall meeting, the real town hall meetings, when the media goes out and they truly talk to people. It's not getting a lot of coverage. Don Lemon, former anchor on CNN, he has conversations with young men of color, and they're not voting for Harris. Harris has a problem with men. Harris really has a problem also with men of color. This has broken into what people don't understand is, I don't think, when you want a return to normalcy, this isn't what I don't think they're capturing is people all over the country feel that, by lack of a better term, but there's been an invasion. And why should these thousands of people be plopped down and they're treated like royalty? You know, you see it locally. McKee and Matos always reaching out. I continue to talk about that the Republican Party of Rhode Island, it's my belief that on Smith Hill, the elected leaders, they fail to capture how many people are tired of Rhode Island operating as a sanctuary state. Granted, Governor McKee, he hides in his different corners where they just say, well, Providence might be a sanctuary state. They don't even address it. Everywhere I go, and I'm very active, as many of you know, people come up to me and say, thank you for speaking out. Keep speaking out. I can't stand that we are a sanctuary state. From Westerly to Woonsocket, we're a sanctuary state. And my point is, no one at the Rhode Island State House speaks up about it. It's a term that no one even wants to dive into. And Massachusetts obviously shares the same thing. But I want to touch on something with this Liz Cheney that, again, locally, you know, I don't, as I've said, we don't have Rhode Island and Mass, especially, I'm just going to focus on Rhode Island for a moment. We don't have any leaders. We have elected officials. Sheldon Whitehouse was going through the motions in the debate against Patricia Morgan. He knows it's a run out the clock. He basically is like, why am, all right, I'll do this. I don't need to do this, but I'll do it. And going through the motions, and Patricia Morgan, to her credit, tried to, but I want to touch on this Liz Cheney thing, because I think, and as I have stated, folks, I think right now, and one of the reasons I enjoy having Donna Perry on the radio portion is the Trump campaign is just firing on all cylinders. And locally, they don't get it. I admit, I despise the way Governor McKee and Matthouse and the way they were all fawning over the governor of Minnesota when he came to Newport. And they were all falling over each other. And Magaziner is useless. And Gabe Amo doesn't know what he's doing. Senator Reed is different because of his service and the Armed Service Committee, West Point grad. He's the only one that I put in a different class. Senator Whitehouse, he's just there on his own agenda. But I'm talking about the State House and why do we have early elections? But I want to just touch on this Liz Cheney thing just for a moment. Folks, this portion of the program is brought to you by AJ Home Improvement. 401-323-9252. Acoustical ceilings, frame to finish basements, new homes, additions, commercial rehabs, painting, remodeling. It's AJ Home Improvement. If you're looking to improve your home or business, call AJ Home Improvement, 401-323-9252. 401-323-9252. AJ Home Improvement. I want to push back against the Never Trumpers or the Liz Cheney type Republicans. There was a time 20 years ago when Rhode Island had two Republicans who were both accomplished individuals and fighters. And it was Mayor Laffey in Cranston, and it was Governor Kucheri. And there was actually a period of time that it seemed a lot of their programs could move things in the right direction. And then Chafee then won the governorship, and the state has really been falling backwards since then. There was a window of time 20 years ago when these two individuals were getting a lot of support and getting a lot of press, and there was a chance the state could have gone in that direction. But this business of Liz Cheney, that is a selfish agenda. It's just, where she's got real nerve is when her father was vice president. I mean, they were brutal to Bush Cheney, and they went after her father on Halliburton, and all the Republicans stood up and defended Cheney. And she's got real nerve with this agenda. And I'll tell you what really upsets me is just look locally. Here's what the local media doesn't get. They certainly don't understand the appeal of Trump. It's because he punches back, because he's a fighter. Look at the Rhode Island Republican Party at the State House. They don't even really fight. And I go back to the Republican Party in Rhode Island was who? Chafee. He was always lame. The father started it, and then he just took over, and then he just turned into a punchline. Who were the Republicans? The Republicans were Scott Avedisian, who allowed special interests to run Warwick into the ground. I like Mayor Fung. I voted for him. I voted for Mayor Fung 3 times, twice for governor, 1 for Congress. But at times, he's probably the closest we've had. But they don't even understand the appeal. That why should, the Rhode Island Republicans, to me, they kind of reflect, and I get it, there's the never Trumpers and blah, 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 and they have a tough time finding anyone that's running for office that supports them. But they miss the appeal. And that's why, and I talked about it and played the sound of President Trump with the Undertaker. I mean, that I can't tell you how great that is. And that McDonald's at the window, it's just absolutely brilliant. And Biden couldn't do something like that. Biden wouldn't be able to keep the order straight. Harris thinks she's above that. Harris, they can't find any record that she worked at McDonald's. He was so gracious about it. That him and the McDonald's, and I can't believe the people, they screened who was going to, as opposed to what? The guy's almost been assassinated twice. I would hope they were screening anyone. And him, the back and forth and the apron. And it was I am telling you, it's making me, last night, as I was watching the video, I'm like, I wouldn't mind some McDonald's fries right now. I mean, it was just so, I think it's going to carry him over the finish line. But I want to talk about the Liz Cheney with this January 6th thing. That I'll admit, I think when President Trump was saying, he hasn't fully threaded the needle, there's no such thing as a perfect candidate. Him with the Undertaker, that was brilliant being on with him. He was. And the Undertaker, I said, there's an interview of the Undertaker explaining how he became the Undertaker, and Vince McMahon calling him and doing the storyboard, and he tells it to Joe Rogan. It is such a compelling interview to listen to. I've watched the interview now. I'm not exaggerating, like 50 times. It's so good. But I want to remind you about Dreammaker. If you're thinking, listen to me, if you're thinking of a bath or kitchen remodel, call Dreammaker. Call today, 401-433-7272. 401-433-7272. Dreammaker. Design Center right there near Kochai, right down from Greenwich, Crown Plaza and next to Kochai. Dreammaker. They will take you from one-stop shop, from concept to completion. Respect, integrity, customer focus. Dennis and Christina are the real deal. Listen, if President Trump lived in Rhode Island or was building in Rhode Island, he would go with Dreammaker. I know that for a fact. Call them today. 401-433-7272. 401-433-7272. Dreammaker. Now, folks, I admit my support for the Trump campaign, it is personal because 8 years ago, it put me at odds where I was on the radio dial. And you don't have to be, Columbo to figure out that the voice that they preferred was the voice on in the afternoon who bashes Trump and they mock Trump and Pork Boy and Fat Allen and the whole thing, and they're buddies with McKee, and they don't like. I think it's, in a word, it's pathetic. And there's other language to describe those individuals that I can't even use because it's politically incorrect and then blah, blah, blah. But I'll just say they're more Tim Walz type of guys. They're more of, dudes for Kamala. You can't, as I've said, I've learned, I was on the radio one time in Boston and I used a slur that was very common. And then they're like, why don't you take the next 2 days off? And so we're not going to get down that path again. But Liz Cheney talking about January 6th, I'm sick of it. No one is voting on that. And she's so selfish because the Republican Party defended the father. Halliburton and the dark underworld, and they wanted the oil and everything else. But here's the thing about January 6th that to me fully threads the needle. It's really simple what happened. And that is, and I can't stand Magaziner, total fraud, doesn't even live in the district. For crying out loud. Gabe Amo, how does he not have a real opponent? He's in favor of open borders. He was campaigning with Palestinian Hamas supporters. He was campaigning with BLM, who are anti-Semitic. And he's basically getting a free ride in CD1. Hey, Jessica De La Cruz, why not? She should have run against him. I know even people like her, I don't think they come out strong enough for President Trump. But I want to just identify, it's really simple on January 6th. The entire country watched the summer of George Floyd as Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all these left-wing protesters basically destroyed with little to no consequences major cities around the country. That's what it was. And you had to sit back and take it because of people like Governor Walz, who did nothing, because of like New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, who did nothing, as someone that covered it locally, because of people like Mayor Jorge Eloya, who did zero and let anarchy reign with the ATVs and the rioters. And so after watching a summer of that, and in Chicago, and in Minneapolis, and in Wisconsin, let alone what they did to Seattle and Portland, I used to wake up early every morning and watch that they were still rioting out west. It was insanity. In Philadelphia, in Atlanta, and everywhere else. And we all had to sit there and take it. And no one could say anything. And no one could say, blah, blah, blah. And it just had to be allowed. And Mayor Elorza, it's the least we could do is let them destroy Providence Place Mall. And it's absurd what went on. And so on January 6th, people that had watched an entire summer of this with no consequences were fed up and went to protest, and most of them were peaceful. So this whole business, that Liz Cheney, she's got real nerve talking about on January 6th and blah, 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 and this whole thing. January 6th wouldn't have happened if you didn't have an entire summer from Memorial Day through the fall of total anarchy and destruction in the name of Black Lives Matter, that were given money and donations and property and buildings and with little to no consequences. It's as simple as that. In her marching around on a personal vendetta, she's on the wrong side of things. But she's on the same side as McRee. And Governor McKee, what does it say? No one calls him out. Governor McKee, let me tell you how incompetent this individual is. I'm going to tell you in just a moment, folks, but I do want to stay on track here and remind you about Kids Club on the Pike. This is a perfect spot for birthday party, any child celebration. Kids Club on the Pike. It's perfect. Birthday party venue, before and after school program, preschool. Look for them on Facebook. Kids Club on the Pike. It's right on the Johnston-Cranston line, right on Plainfield Pike. And you can call them at 401-443-5336. If you're looking to have a child's birthday party, or maybe a soccer party or a cheerleading party for youth now, this is ideal for children ages 2 and up, 2 to 13, 2 to 14. There's a library, there's a dance room, there's a movie theater room, there's a old-fashioned diner. The kids love it. Their videos are amazing. Kids Club on the Pike. And it's not like Chuck E. Cheese that every kid leaves sick with a germ. As I told you, I heard from a father, his child's soccer team, one of the parents thought, wouldn't it be great? We'll bring all these young kids to Dave and Buster's at Providence Place Mall on a Friday night. Young kids. 2 of the kids got robbed on their way up there. One of the parents got robbed. Somebody was assaulted. You can't go to Providence Place Mall on a Friday night. It's gang night. What is wrong with you people? Safety. Well, some parent thought Dave and Buster's, gee, why don't you have the kids ride around with me on road patrol, for crying out loud? Kids Club on the Pike. It's safe, it's clean, and it's the perfect spot for a youth party. But right now, with this election, and it's so consequential, I can't stress enough that the McDonald's Trump at McDonald's, it's what they don't get. And Governor McKee, he wouldn't even. Someone wanted to host a fundraiser at the farm of Jerry Zarella, who had run the Trump campaign in 2016. And because someone was going to hold a fundraiser on his farm, McKee, I'm not going there. I don't associate with that kind. There's something wrong with anyone that would vote for them. They're not welcome in Rhode Island. Belittle, besmirch, denigrate. Sabina Matos, there's no room in Rhode Island for these MAGA Republicans. They should all move out of the state. Hey, blank you to the McKee administration. That McDonald's, President Trump in the window, the drive-through of the McDonald's, I am telling you, I think he just cemented the election. And there's nothing wrong with McDonald's. And him at the window with the apron and the French fries. And as Donna Perry said, him saying, I love salt. And the interaction. He's so relatable. And sitting there with The Undertaker. And he's friends with Hulk Hogan. And and it's so funny. And the Harris is, Harris, Waltz. Listen, what type of guy would vote for Harris Waltz? Dan Yorkwood, that type of guy. How can I say this politely? Lighten the loafers, right? Yeah, the same type who would defend the naked fat coach. The same type that would say there's nothing more fun than a bunch of naked guys in a locker room. The same type that would defend McKee. They're not, I'll say that. Maybe they identify as male, but they're not like real guys, right? They're not like real guys, and they're not comfortable around real guys. They're just identify as male, but they easily could identify as something else. So that McDonald's, and of course it was a stunt, but he was so at home and so gracious. What Governor McKee and the bashing that goes on, Seth Magaziner, and I loathe these people. I can't. It's not fake. I can't stand them. And McKee with this bridge, he's Gerard Mayo trying to do the offense, and the cast of characters. I'm telling you, It's actually embarrassing to talk about it. There was a reporter from out of state at a big paper that called and said, I'd love to get some comments on the record about the bridge. And I'll admit, it was embarrassing to talk about that. This is the Keystone Cops. They can't do, McKee can't do a 2-car funeral. It was, we kind of live with it, but it's embarrassing. That's what he is. And then the person was saying, well, what about the lieutenant governor? And then I realized that we don't dwell on it. But these of course, these people have no answers. They're not up for the job. McKee he's so not ready for prime time. He's just, oh my God. But there's hope. There's hope on the horizon. And Trump at that McDonald's window, there's something American about that. You know what else? And I'm so tired of, and Chafee had this attitude, and Raimondo had this attitude, and certainly Magaziner and Amo and McKee and Matos, and they're basically to their core ashamed of America. And that's really what 2020 was. When Kamala Harris offered to bail out the rioters, it comes down to this attitude that they're embarrassed of the country. And we have nothing to be embarrassed about. Zero. But that's what it is. Now, I find them embarrassing. And I can't, President Trump is the polar opposite of Dan McKee. You just can't get more opposite. And I actually think a Trump presidency, it's going to put the likes of McKee out of business. Because I'm telling you right now, the way they run the state, it's so flawed and it's so incompetent, and we are overtaxed, and there's way too much government, and there's way too many state jobs, and the overtime costs, and the inmates running the asylum, and people are escaping from the ACI, and the ACI guards, 30 million over budget in overtime. 30 million over budget in overtime. I'm not talking about what was budgeted for overtime. 30 million above that. To allow them to perpetrate that is just sheer incompetence. Val Lawson, the teachers union, I'm going to be the number 2 in the Senate. Where is the Republican Party? Where is De La Cruz? That's beyond a conflict of interest. That would never be allowed in other states. What do you think she's going to do up there? She thinks she's going to improve education? They're going to try to squeeze out the private schools. They're going to try to squeeze out the Catholic schools. And everyone's silent about it. That woman, how is that woman even still in office? She's the senator for the East Bay that has the bridge trouble. She has no intelligence. These people shouldn't be in positions of power. What I like about the bridge is McRee and his pal, Governor McKee, they can't hide from it. They can't spin you on it. It's so egregious, and the cost is so out of control. And 3-month delay is actually turning into a minimum of 3-year delay. Part of it is it's such the epitome. It's the opposite of competent is what it is. And I get it. Like McKee, he thinks he's got his whole routine down. I want to be very clear. I don't dislike Dan McKee, the individual, right? Again, I hear from people. I liked him as our mayor of Cumberland. I believe you. And, the whole thing with the mother and the commercials, rest in peace, she was nice. And then, the daughter trying out seems to have a noise. I'm not saying the guy seems to have a nice, I'm not saying personally he doesn't have a nice family. And he does. He seems like the grandfather governor. But I'm just like, this is torturous that we're going through this. He's clearly not up for the job. And so as I ride around, when we're on road patrol, what do you hear? Like every other call, Spanish speaking officer needed. And it's not your imagination. It's not kind of third world, the condition they allow us to be in. It is third world. And those people are coming from third world. And they allow them to manipulate the system and take advantage. And it's just plain wrong. Why? We shouldn't be allowed. Why do people that actually live in the Dominican Republic, they allow them to come here, they don't pay taxes, they send their kids to the schools, I don't know, for part of the year, and then they go back there. Like, why is that even allowed? Why is any of it allowed? None of it should be allowed. And all those people at the State House, they just keep adding jobs. You don't have any company that just keeps adding jobs with all the computer technology and everything else we have. There's no company that just keeps adding jobs like that. They just keep adding more jobs under the payroll, and you have to pay it, and I have to pay it. In the public school system, they want to squeeze the charter schools. They want to squeeze out the private schools. They want to squeeze out the Catholic schools, and they're more than happy to have illegals as the students in the schools because it keeps the jobs flowing. It's such a broken agenda. These people, they deserve no sympathy, and they don't deserve any support. And Governor McKee, he thinks he's got it down. I go on Channel 12 live for 5 minutes, it's beat the clock. He goes on Channel 10 for 5 minutes, it's beat the clock. He goes on his radio segment, Protect the Governor, and then that's about it. And they think like they're getting over on everybody. Folks, this portion of the Real News, it's brought to you by Watson Materials. Largest selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island is Watson Materials Landscape Supply Center. Now, you can call them, request a quote, 401-885-0600. 401-885-0600. Watson Materials, the most complete selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island, whether it's landscape lighting or pavers or retaining walls, natural stone, cobblestone, decorative stone, sand, stone veneer, outdoor features, Watson Materials. I share their Facebook page. Fantastic. Landscape Supply Center, the most complete selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island is Watson Materials. Well, folks, good afternoon. I am fired up because I'm starting to, if you're really following it, this election could turn into a landslide. This election could be potentially a blowout. Now, it's tough because we're not on the ground, but I actually think the undecideds are breaking for Trump. And all the warning signs are there for Harris. 2 weeks out, and I think they see that the election could be slipping away, and it's fantastic. And the reasons why that Harris and Waltz, with his feminine products in the boys' room, they're so aggressive trying to cram their agenda down your throat and our throats, and what they want in the schools and what you have to accept. And you have to put up with incompetence. And locally, you have to put up with no bid contracts. And all these people that are invading from other parts of the world, you have to pay for them. And you have to pay for them to go to school. And you have to give them a driver's license. And you have to pay for them to go to the emergency room. And Governor McKee and Matos, you have to pay for their kids to get an education. It's such nonsense. They're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. And that's why the McDonald's thing, I think it just, it hit. So what? What's wrong with McDonald's? What's wrong with Coca-Cola? What's wrong with driving a car that you need gas? By the way, all of this McKee nonsense about all this offshore wind and green energy and everything, it's all a fraud. It's all fake. The only way that you can open and operate those companies is you have to let the unions run your company. That's it. And it shouldn't be that way. If you want to bid on something, the soccer stadium was a no bid contract. The bridge, part of the bridge, if you want to build the bridge, you have to use all of these union work. How is that possible? Other states don't do that. Their stuff isn't falling down. All of these projects. And of course, they don't want a constitutional convention because they don't want to change the way they do things. There's an opportunity here and McRee, Governor McKee is always celebrating other people's cultures, always celebrating other people's cultures. In Matos, Americans and these are MAGA Republicans. There's no room for them in Rhode Island. Well, what about this? Maybe there's no room for you in Rhode Island. I come back to what competent official, what serious individual of all the people that McKee could have chosen to be his lieutenant governor, what type of individual picks someone who's such a lightweight as Sabina Matos? When she ran for that open seat in Congress, it totally exposed her for the lightweight. She finished 4th in the election. She doesn't belong there. The state is, and they were not the choices of the voters. They weren't. This early voting thing is a joke. We're 2 weeks out. Why do we have voting right now? There's no lines. This isn't Georgia. This isn't Florida. We don't have lines like that. This isn't Michigan. You don't need to have election. There's already early voting underway. For what? They're just stuffing those boxes is all they're doing. Folks, this portion of the program is brought to you by J. Perry Paving. Call them today, 401-732-1730. 401-732-1730. Letter J. J. Perry Paving. High quality, fair pricing, exceptional service, free estimate for any project. So if you're thinking of your driveway or parking lot, call J. Perry Paving today, 401-732-1730. You can find them on Facebook and online. Letter J. J. Perry Paving. Well, folks, good afternoon. Now, I also want to remind you, yes, we'll be active with Road Patrol Live later on. Warm weather, going to be warm all week. I am a little surprised it's been quiet, but I don't think it's going to last that long. Don't forget, Road Patrol Live is sponsored by Rhode Island Guns and Ammo. It's not your imagination. Governor McKee is on a mission. Dan McKee's on a mission to remove and put up barriers against legal gun owners. And at the same time, he's more than content to allow dangerous criminals to come into the state. Folks, you have the right. That's why we have George on every Friday. You have the right to protect your family. You have the right to protect your employees. Stop in and see George, Rhode Island Guns and Ammo. Post Road in Warwick, right off of Route 37, right down the street from Greg's Restaurant near Cosmic Pizza. Brand new, refurbished, whatever you're looking for, Rhode Island Guns and Ammo. Stop in and see my gun guy. This election, it means so much more. It's about not being ashamed to be an American. It is about taking care of Americans first. It is about that. It's about holding people accountable. Now, I'm telling you right now what no one else talks about, and I have this firsthand. President Trump gets elected. There is no guarantee that they're getting all this federal money for the bridge. There's no guarantee at all. I don't believe it. Zero. What I've been told, let's wait and see what the federal investigation shows. $4 billion. See, here's the Governor McKee position. Let's not even look and see what happened. Just give us more money. It's not going to happen. He's demonized the Trump administration too much. And when you talk about where they have the real nerve to talk, and it's falling short. And I'm glad it's falling short. Democracy's on the ballot. You push out one candidate, you bring in another. Rhode Island Governor Dan McKee, he lost primary day of voting to Helena, folks. He was not who people wanted. But the union members that have profited, that he opened up, blank check, whatever you want, they stuffed all those boxes with McKee ballots. Many of them voted twice. That's why we're stuck with him. That's why we're stuck with Matos. Don't tell me about democracy. If we had a real democracy, Alan Fung would be the congressman in the 2nd district. Alan Fung won day of voting. Wasn't even close. But then what did the unions do? They stuffed the boxes for Magaziner, who doesn't even live in the district. Don't lecture me about democracy on the ballot. We're voting 21 days out. For what? But there's no reason other than to try to manipulate the results. That's what's going on. And they have no intentions of changing it because they feel they have the method down. They have the recipe down. They feel this way they can hold on to power. That's why they want to do that. That's why they plan on doing that. So this business, democracy's on the ballot. We don't have democracy in our part of the country. We don't have legitimate elections. Remove Trump. Get rid of. We should not have our elections this way. We need legitimate elections. We need elections closer to election day. We should not have these unsolicited mail ballots. There's no reason for all these unsolicited mail ballots. It's a joke. They do it because, as Justin Katz has said, because they found a way to manipulate the results to get the results that they want. But it's against the will of the people. So what we have is people saying, I'm not ashamed to be an American. I'm not ashamed to go to McDonald's. I'm not ashamed to, stand up. I'm not ashamed to say boys should not be playing female sports. And, most people, if given a chance, reject the Jen Lima, Dan York, Dan McKee, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. They don't have relatable values. They want to run a social experiment where if someone is 19 and he grows his hair long and changes his name from Steve to Stone, suddenly or from Ken to Kennedy, he can, I guess he wants to identify as a girl. It's so preposterous that we have fallen into this. And people are saying, I don't want that. I don't want. And all the criminals that McKee and White House have allowed to come into the state. And they what do they say to the media? Don't highlight if someone's an illegal anymore. Don't highlight that. Don't cover that. Don't mention that in your coverage. Don't mention that. What I've told you. What do police say when I say, what is the legal status of that criminal? They say, Juan, you're the only one that still asks that question. And the answer to that question, no. They are not documented. We've contacted ICE. What is Governor McKee? No one should be asking about that. What did Lieutenant Governor Matos say? The moment you arrive in Rhode Island, you're a Rhode Island citizen. They're making it up as they go along. Folks, this portion of our program is brought to you by Propane Plus. Call them today, 401-885-4209. In Massachusetts, 508-252-3359. They have a great website. A great American company is Propane Plus. Residential or commercial, you can count on Propane Plus. Go log on, propaneplus.com. Residential, commercial, type in your zip code, Propane Plus, 401-885-4209 or 508-252-3359 for Propane Plus. Folks, what this is people saying, I'm not ashamed. Governor McKee, Americans have a lot to be ashamed about. I disagree with that. I fundamentally disagree with that. Pork boy, the least we could do is give reparations. But I'm against that. I'm against that as well. Enough of that. Wrong. There's no Governor McKee, there's no reason for anyone to be driving a car with gasoline. Look at the storms in Florida. They didn't have power. They didn't have power. In Providence, we're not going to let any more gas stations coming in. What are you talking about? It's a war on vehicles, is what it is. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because it's not realistic. Governor McKee, we're going to make sure every business you have to have union workers. Who are you to tell companies how to run their company? Why don't you fix the bridge? Why don't you fire Igliosi, who was throwing a fundraiser the night they closed the bridge? Nobody fired, no one suspended, no one demoted. Why do you think Hasbro has a foot out the door? Why do you think CVS has a foot out the door? Governor McKee, if you want to have a company in Rhode Island, it must be unionized workers. Based on what? Florida doesn't have that. The Carolinas don't have that. Tennessee doesn't have that. Texas doesn't have that. Ohio doesn't have that. Who are you to dictate how they should run their company? Captain Clown. Captain Clown. All right, folks, coming up on the radio, you're going to hear the 2 o'clock news, and we'll be back tomorrow at 11. For Road Patrol, we're going to do Road Patrol Live later. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. It is a beautiful Tuesday, October 22nd. Remember, log on to depetro.com. Stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news, and we'll be back later on for Road Patrol Live.